This week, we're joined by Darrell of Gideon Brothers. He is the director of sales, previously holding roles as the manager of Southeast Asia for Universal Robots and at SMC Corporation. Darrell has an awesome sense of humor. He's witty. He loves to crack his jokes, and we covered a bunch of amazing topics like how he transitioned from his role in a very different market to what he's doing now with Gideon Brothers. We talked about his approach to sales, how he's working on his engineering department to bring them up to speed with selling, actually. And please join us for this episode.
Yeah, Darrell went in a lot of depth of how the technology works from autonomous robots for Gideon Brothers and the differences between 6-axis robots and the go-to-market strategy, as well as going through sales methodology for anybody within commercial selling. We talk a little bit about some of our favorite sales training companies and methodologies as well. So please give us a listen and enjoy.
Welcome to the Robot Thought Leaders Podcast with Zach Tompkinson and Chris Savoya, bringing you in-depth interviews with industry experts driving change in the robot world.
Well, Darrell, thank you for joining us. And as a former colleague of UR, so we've worked together for a few years. I think it was about 3 years we were together at Universal Robots, and Chris as well. We met at least a few times at our kickoff meetings, but you've recently left for Gideon Brothers, a autonomous mobile robot company out of Croatia. So will you just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about the move that you made recently?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's, I think this is my 10th week now with Gideon Brothers. So it's been an exciting journey. For starters, it meant a move from Singapore up to what was initially planned as Munich, but unfortunately COVID put some dents in that. So now based in Zagreb, Croatia, which is where our HQ is. So
been there.
Yeah, it's a lovely place to live for sure. It's quite a bit smaller than Singapore, which it was a bit of a surprise to me. I quite enjoy as well, but the move from UR certainly has been a big change from articulated robots to autonomous mobile robots. We do some very interesting things. We're working on a whole lot of very new and exciting technology that certainly will change some of the accepted standards right now in terms of how autonomous mobile robots work. So part of the reason that I'm here is the technology drew me, for starters, but also a change in role up to the director of sales for the business. So it's an exciting overview globally. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And previously you were managing, pretty much all of Southeast Asia, right? Or
yeah,
all
Southeast Asia, Australia, New Zealand. So it was the area that I looked after for UR. Yeah.
Quite a different market and move for you. What is similar about it and what is different?
Similar about it is the challenges around language, I would say. A lot of different languages around where we are here. Mm-hmm. My Croatian's not up to scratch. I had the privilege of living with quite a few Croatians where I grew up. So unfortunately, all I learned from them is how to swear. So I can swear here in Croatian, but that's about it. So the language barrier is certainly common here and something we deal with regularly. And that's also similar in Southeast Asia. The other thing is dealing with multiple locations for how businesses operate, different countries, different operations. That's another commonality for sure between Southeast Asia and here.
Sure.
So there's certainly a lot of differences though. Certainly the food's changed quite a bit from Asian cuisine now to European. So I'm embracing the olives at the moment. I'm sure at some point I'll likely get sick of them, but for the moment, definitely invested in what I can eat here on the Mediterranean.
Yeah, we'll have some Mediterranean food for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so it does have some distinct similarities in a lot of ways. Certainly bigger portfolio now, or bigger geography, dealing with the US as well.
Sure.
Asia's not in our current portfolio, but it is something that we'll grow into over the next year to 18 months. So it's on the cards. It's just we have a relatively small team at the moment, so we're trying to expand into that logically rather than throwing ourselves at it.
How does Gideon go to market? I mean, when you want to sell something, do you have a network of resellers or?
Yeah, so we're actually at least two channels at this point, possibly three if you want to break out the OEM style business as well. So we have a standard off-the-shelf product in a deck load AMR. That's fairly common to what you see in the market in a lot of our competitors, for sure. The other way we go to so that is channeled through the indirect sales, so through distributors. We're building our distributor base at the moment. That's certainly part of the reason that I'm here, given my experience in building and managing distribution with Universal Robots, and also back into SMC Pneumatics. So that's certainly a part of what we do, but we're also direct for key accounts, for large key accounts. Certainly the distribution support's helpful in far-flung locations, which is how we organize it. And then we have our own autonomy stack and AI and vision solution that is a bolt-on or a designed-in fit for OE equipment as well. So that's another channel, I suppose, down through the OE leg of the business.
Ultimately, if in that last channel you're talking about, you would sell the software to someone that was building their own autonomous mobile robot and wanted the software stack that was already ready to go, but maybe had a specific design that they needed for their autonomous robot.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea. We're a little deeper than that though. So we have I'll call it a compute box just for the simplistic, phraseology. But we basically have all the onboard computing for the AI, and also a home designed 3D vision system that has taken us the last couple of years to develop, to allow us to see the world in a more human-like nature, rather than most of the autonomous robots out there use a RealSense vision system, which is we found it very limited for what we were trying to achieve. So that comes along with it, I suppose. So it's the
in terms of the actual voxel size, or like the resolution of the camera.
Yeah, so it's actually a whole stack of things. So it's resolution for starters, but also we do plan to get to outdoor operations with the system as well. So that change in the change in light is something that you really struggle to deal with the off-the-shelf available units. So that, combined with a whole lot of other software, I won't call them issues, but just limitations. We didn't have the ability to dig into the software firmware as much as we wanted. Obviously, anyone else who makes something's going to have some limitation in terms of what you can dig into. So we found that limitation about 2 years ago, and have spent that time developing our own solution. And 2020 was when we incorporated that into the AMR to give us a extension around what we can do there. So it's a pretty significant change in terms of how the AMR views the world.
Yeah. Is it visible light that it uses, or infrared as well, or?
Yeah, so we have a mixture of different things on the AMR. LiDAR is a requirement, mainly because of the standard. You have to hit the safety standard. So that's something that we have as a 360 LiDAR review, and that will continue until potentially the standard changes to include 3D vision. But we also have light vision, and we have some sonar on there as well for some additional information gathering. But predominantly we do our SLAM, or navigation, through the LiDAR, with the visual becoming on a secondary system on top of that. The 3D vision gives you the ability to pick very small in some cases, but to the 3D AI, it's quite obvious what they are. Things in the distance that you can use to help you navigate as well. So we use the 3D vision as part of the navigation systems for the robot as well.
Very cool. Is there
Mm.
any like strategic partnerships? I know there's, for a while Tesla was working with Nvidia, for example, or anything like that that you can talk about at this time, or
Yeah, certainly. It's funny you use that name, Tesla. It's not somebody who we work with. We certainly would happily sell them some robots, as I'm sure anyone would. But
yeah,
the solution that's been developed in Gideon Brothers is actually very Tesla-like in terms of the fact that we identify not only groups of things. So the grouping that is human or dog or cat,
right.
but we can identify instances of that as well. So Jack Russell versus Great Dane or something like that.
Yeah.
You can actually pick as well. So very similar to what Tesla's doing with their equipment or with their visual 3D vision systems.
Are you taking like a neural network after the fact with all of the data that you get on site with a customer, have that recorded, find where it worked or didn't work, throw that back through the neural network to learn from the, I guess, wins and losses, say?
Yeah, I think earlier on we were certainly doing that, but not through anything external. It's the regulations certainly around being able to see people and identify them.
Hmm.
Obviously, there's a lot of regulation around how we do that. So
Yeah,
Mhm.
we certainly we limit ourselves to security, or to limit the security to make sure that that it keeps that intel
Yeah.
inside our business. So a lot of it's been done quite manually, in fact. So for those of you who, if you guys aren't aware, when you complete a capture, when you log into something that says click on the fire hydrant,
Yeah.
this is actually Google outsourcing their identification to
sure.
humans.
Right.
So we do the same thing. We've just got people who sit there and do annotation, and we
The
started
labeling.
from scratch basically. Yeah. So down to a pixel level, effectively, we segment those 2D and 3D images into something that we can then identify using the AI. So
Mhm.
our AI is pretty smart now. We've gotten to the point where we can inside most environments, we can identify everything we need to. Now, let's be obvious here. There's some of these things you identify them to drive around. Like don't run into this, for example, is a
Yeah.
pretty obvious way to go.
Yeah.
But even down to now, dynamic changes in, say, the flooring. So if you have an epoxy peel in a factory and it's outside of the capacity of the robot to actually move across that, it will navigate around it. So really quite handy for dynamic environments. And
Cool.
the other thing is something as simple as following a human from one location to another. We can
Yeah.
pick the instance of that particular individual and move from one area to another. So some there's quite a lot of exciting things that you can draw from that as well, like
Yeah.
spotting pallet orientation, for
Hmm.
example, on the floor, being able to then position yourself to meet that pallet orientation rather than having to have the structured environment that everybody's used to at the moment. So
Mhm.
Sure.
that will be a significant change in terms of how businesses operate.
Very cool. Very
Mm.
cool. Thanks for taking us through that technology.
No problem.
Last one for you in terms of that. I mean, in general, do you think that the or the environment is more structured with what you're dealing with now in the manufacturing space than it would be, for example, with Tesla, like on a road? Does that make the problem a little bit easier in general, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's the classing of, Tesla deals with thousands of classes in terms of what they're identifying on the road. Everything from the white lines that mean stop or give way versus the signage, the red light, the cameras. Sorry, excuse me, not cameras. The
Stop lights.
lights. Yeah, stop, go, yellow. All those sorts of things are all identified. We're certainly at a different class level in terms of
Yeah.
what we identify. Our environments that we'll operate in will always be semi-structured. Even the outdoor environment will still be a semi-structured environment. We may be seeing trucks, trailers, forklifts, things like that we can identify again at an instance level. So we can say truck one, truck two, forklift one, forklift two. We can identify those and maneuver around.
And the universe is smaller, right? I mean, the area
Yeah,
where you end up being structured within is going to be, maybe a few 100,000 square feet. Whereas, if you're in a car, it could be a few 100,000 square miles, right? And
Yeah,
so
that's
I
right.
think that's just the area in which you're learning is a lot. The universe is a lot smaller
Yeah, for
and
sure.
less detrimental. Like if you fail and something does go wrong, it maybe you damage parts, which isn't good,
Yeah.
but the likelihood of, say, a death is going to be, not to say it couldn't happen, but it's not going to be as prominent as, say, in a car. Right?
Severity.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't have to deal with the death or death scenario as well that Tesla has to deal with. You know, who do we kill, the pedestrian or the person driving the
Right.
car? That's not something we have to think about. So the philosophy doesn't come into our decision making at this point. So we're just dealing with making sure we don't hurt anyone around us or damage equipment, basically. And
Yeah.
most of that's pretty readily identifiable. Yeah, certainly for us now, after 5 years of developing the AI at the back end of this, we can identify just about everything we need to. And frankly speaking, if we can't identify it, then we treat it as something we can't traverse anyway. So we go around it. So
Mhm.
even something as simple as a ball of plastic, plastic bag, something like that, that may have a detrimental effect to the robot getting wrapped up in wheels or things like that, we can make the decision to maneuver around that as well.
Foreign objects of some sort.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, if you've ever been in a manufacturing, and I know both of you guys have, right? Manufacturing or
pretty messy.
logistics. I mean, you've got cardboard, pieces of metal, all sorts of things
Oil,
laying
grease.
around.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. So we have the capability to identify those and make a decision. And the decision may be to stop if it's something we don't identify.
Yeah.
And that actually then prompts us to do the AI training and to then single that out in future, so we know what to do with it.
Well, it brings up an interesting point that I wanted to take it down two different paths here. One, I'm curious of the difference in 6-axis robot versus autonomous mobile robot customer focus and base. There's obviously some overlap, but there's also primarily from a large bulk of business, it's quite different. And then I wanted to take it through, like, what are the decision making that goes on when you're picking an autonomous mobile robot, and picking the product that best fits your needs. Those are sort of the two angles, and I didn't know which one you wanted to go down first.
Well, I mean, either one's fine with me, mate. Which direction would you like to go first?
Let's do the first one first. Talk about the differences between, I mean, they're pretty obvious, but like, how do you sell mobile robots versus you're really good and pretty experienced at selling manipulators?
Yeah, look, there is some crossover for sure, but we predominantly, the biggest concern right now for us, and like most, I think, in the AMR space, is that we are where Universal Robots was probably 7 or 8 years ago. So we're still in that education phase. We're still helping people understand exactly what we can do, potentially better than anyone else, or whatever that might look like. So
Yeah.
there's some industries who need us, but they're not particularly ready to take us yet. The mindset hasn't shifted to now pick those up. So the biggest market for AMRs in general, I would say, would be logistics or logistics centers. Typically, third-party logistics is a real focus for most of us, and that's really around the fact that they've been dealing with AGVs in the past, to without the autonomy, basically take things from one point to another. And the dynamics of their businesses have changed quite significantly because, especially if you look at the era of COVID, you're now dealing with potentially different size pallets, different structures to pallets. There's a whole lot of other things that people need to take into account.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's not just an A through Z scenario now. You've got to deal with the B's, C's, D's, and everything else along the way. So the logistics group is certainly, or the logistics vertical is certainly ready for what we do. And in most cases, certainly our largest customers right now are logistics, and of those, the majority, I would say, are 3PLs. So that's certainly one of the major markets. But let's be really honest.
We see that often with manipulators too. I mean, we were talking about it on a previous podcast too. The amount of companies that have gotten major funding or even went public with logistics solutions, whether they're manipulators or others, it's a real trend right now. It's obvious to anyone who's looking. So it
Sure.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, UR deals with the putting things in the right place, and then we deal with moving them to the other place. You know,
Yeah.
that's kind of where AMRs sit. Certainly, Gideon Brothers, we do that in a different way in a lot of ways, and certainly to a higher safety standard outside of what the specification recommends, or sorry, the standard recommends.
Sure.
So that's an aspect as well. You know, in a lot of these mixed environments, you're talking about people on forklifts who, forklifts have a standard in terms of their maximum speed. I have to say, I've walked into many different logistics locations and found that standard may just be getting tweaked just a little bit.
Yeah.
You know,
The
so
governor's pulled off or something like that.
Yeah.
yeah, so that changes that environment, the dynamics of it, makes it
Mhm.
from something that an AGV can just trundle around and not be in the road to something that needs to be able to deal with a whole lot of changes that happen every day. And taking one of the biggest challenges for these large 3PLs is that they go from an environment that's open in the morning. There's nothing in their dock. It's empty, and some AMRs don't have the capability to deal with that. It's too big. LiDAR has a reach, and once you get outside of that, it can't deal with it. Then the next problem is by the end of the day or the middle of the day, there's pallets sitting everywhere, and now again with the LiDAR, you're limited by the fact that you can't see the points that you picked up earlier in the day to help you identify where you are. And again, using some additional technology on top of that allows for you to then figure out where you are and maneuver in that space as well. So
Right.
like any machine, there's limitations to what we can do as well, of course, but
Yeah.
it certainly adds a little bit more humanity to the decision-making process of the
Yeah.
robot.
The context is important to see. So logistics, big market. Do you have any do you have any markets for mobile robots that, you're kind of like feeling out still, but you don't know how they would pan out, but they seem like they could be exciting?
Yeah, absolutely. Retail is a really exciting market for us at the moment. We're looking through what's happening in the retail space, especially again, COVID being a driver. You've got a lot of people who are less inclined to interact with each other. They certainly don't want to group inside an area to perhaps pick up their food or whatever that might be. Also, the idea of less human interaction with your food is something that a lot of people are finding positive at this point. So that's another very interesting space that we look forward to celebrating in the not too distant future.
Yeah.
So that's
And that's very collaborative when you're getting
yeah.
consumers involved. It's like a next level of expectations for safety.
Yeah, for sure. We've certainly had quite a lot of people knock on our door around that recently, just to say, well, hey, can this be used in this sort of environment? And again, this is so potentially indoor and outdoor. Keep in mind, you're dealing with now rain, snow, whatever the outdoor might throw at these particular AMRs as well. That's simply outside of the realm of what LiDAR can do. You can't deal with those sorts of environments with LiDAR alone. So
Yeah.
we're looking forward to a change in the standard as well that will help drive around how we can certify safety systems that include 3D navigation, 3D visual navigation and SLAM. So that's down the track, but that's certainly something that we're
Much
working.
like many standards, they tend to have to be dragged along and
Yeah.
somewhat lagging the technology oftentimes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, I mean, yeah, look, we all know the first 4 years, I think UR had a collaborative robot in the space. There was no standard to certify it against. So it's no different, which is why I say we're kind of a little bit behind in the AMR space versus what the articulated collaborative robot is in now. So it's a exciting development phase because this is where the technology develops quickly. We make changes on the fly and make things work fast. And certainly that's what we're doing here with 60 plus engineers inside our business now.
Awesome.
That are focused just really on visual autonomy.
Well, it's interesting. I know China used, during the COVID outbreak, they used mobile robots to deliver food and deliver groceries as well. Some were drone based, but there were a lot that were mobile robots driving around on the streets and sidewalks. So it's an interesting market, and I think in the long run, that delivery market, depending within a certain range of the shop that you're at, could be
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah,
What
certainly
about
last mile delivery is a big focus of anyone involved in this space at the moment, for sure.
Mhm.
yeah,
It's such a huge market. Even the likes of Amazon are involved in how they can develop the systems to meet that expectation.
yeah. Well, I guess I was going to ask but I have a better one, I think. So, where do you think the market goes in 5 years from now, from an indoor versus outdoor perspective? Do you think indoor becomes more prominent usage, or do you think that outdoor ultimately has a bigger piece of the
I,
pie?
yeah, I think it's different chassis for different locations. So indoor will still be there. It'll just be something a little more simple in terms of the chassis. And when you move outdoor, typically you have to have more robust wheels, more robust. The chassis needs to be more robust. You generally can't use differential drive, which rules out 0 point turning, which means you now have to think about a lot of other things. You're thinking
Yeah.
about path planning. You're thinking about the rear parts of the robot cutting corners potentially. So you're now thinking about safety outside of just what the 0 point turn units are doing. So outside becomes a different in that we're now having to think about more stuff for
Sure.
starters, but also it opens up
Sure.
some fairly significant benefits to very typically the most dangerous environments, certainly in logistics. The load unload area outside of the dock or off dock,
Mhm.
and also the storage and internal movements of products around outside.
Yeah.
That has been being done by forklift and human right now. That realistically, if you can pull people out of that unsafe environment, it'll happen just because of the safety ramifications of getting it wrong out there. Again, like you said, Zach, if you turn over an AMR with some goods on it in an environment that's without potential for hurting humans, the worst case is you have to replace the stock. It's a lot. I mean, we can all agree that a life is worth a lot more than that.
Yeah, for sure.
Sure.
I can see how obviously outdoor is more difficult and has a lot more variables to take into consideration. But I can't help but wonder, having outdoor capability, even if it's an indoor robot, provides a market that is double, triple what a strictly indoor robot has capabilities for, not just for logistics or even retail, but you can go down the line. There's many other examples that this could be used for. And so another example, which isn't a market, but is a solution that I want to ask you about, is mobile manipulation, or as Chris would call them, mobile manipulators, where it's a autonomous mobile robot plus a 6-axis robot, or 7-axis or 5-axis, but essentially the legs meeting the arm from a robot standpoint.
Yeah, I think there's certainly indoor aspects to that at the moment. I think in the vast majority of cases, unfortunately, if you're talking the lighter end of the robots being collaborative, and let's be honest, the safer end of the market as well, the collaborative robots typically, the payload becomes an issue if you're dealing with an outdoor environment. You're normally lifting something that's larger than that. Even if it's a retail operation, you're still dealing with things that are significantly larger than that in terms of payload. So that becomes a limitation. The other limitation is, of course, if you then go to an industrial robot,
Strength
you
and weight.
simply, yeah, I mean, you're now talking about carrying around the weight of the robot rather than the weight of the goods. So it becomes a sort of a rock and a hard place. You make it bigger, and then you have to make it bigger, if you know what I mean. So,
Yeah.
so I think indoor has significantly more potential for an articulated robot on an AGV or AMR. Certainly, there's AGV examples out there now. There are some AMR examples as well. The biggest problem that we face, or that we face in terms of a robot collaboration between those two legs and arms, is that we're still not really geared to deal with the same standards around safety. For example, the collaborative robot safety requirement doesn't really include the use of a autonomous vehicle. So you're now dealing with spaces that perhaps some people are less, they find less palatable just because of the potential for risk there. So
You're saying that essentially
there is no standard that unites them, is what you're
correct.
saying. And
Yeah.
my understanding, at least, is that essentially you'd have to risk assess them as two independent systems and try and smush those risk assessments together,
Yeah,
essentially,
correct.
because there's not unified standards.
And I would assume that they are different, but I would assume that the collaborative robot standard is a little more stringent because it has to allow for picking of actual items that could be, sharp, right? Versus a autonomous robot is not going to have that same interaction. The human would be putting it in there at that point.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I think they're different in a number of ways. Certainly, yes, they are different in the way you've just described, but certainly the standards around, because the payloads typically carried by AMRs are significantly higher than even some industrial robots are capable of dealing with. Our platform is 1 ton at the moment, a metric ton. So with that in, and we see that going uphill, not down. I think the US, for example, their maximum pallet for grocers is 2,600 pounds. So that's an increase in tonnage, not a decrease. So that will be a driver, and you can see as a commonality amongst all of the AMRs that they're increasing payload. That payload increase means that you've got the potential then for higher center of gravities, which if you don't stop appropriately, you can end up throwing them on the ground, or worst case, you throw them on somebody standing in front who stopped the robot in an emergency scenario.
Yeah.
So it would really be something, I guess, from a mobile manipulation standpoint, where you're providing legs to the arm, let's say, and then doing something else that you're not really worried about putting it in your backpack or whatever you want to call it, right? Like you're not actually like putting anything on your base with you to go and drive away, but more providing flexibility to that 6-axis arm, right?
Yes.
So then that 6-axis arm can be doing many other applications rather than doing the one thing that it does all day in a fixed location.
That's right. And certainly the commonality between collaborative robots and collaborative mobile robots, which is what an AMR represents realistically, is a collaborative robot base, is that with the technology improvement, certainly the localization improvement, you can, hopefully we will get to the point in the not too distant future where instead of having a 7th axis moving a collaborative robot from one location to another, we could do that with an AMR.
Yeah.
But you need to get the SLAM down to a point, or down to a granularity where you have the ability to pick millimeters or even sub-millimeter movements to be able to do that. And there's nobody really in the market capable of that at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly the 3D vision that we're using gives us a sub-centimeter ability to predict exactly where we are, but that's still not sub-millimeter or even down to a millimeter. So
that's using vision solutions. Obviously, is there any mechanical or otherwise solutions that you think might work?
Oh yeah, certainly you could put so for us, I'm talking about the global localization, the global SLAM. That really just is using the entire room or the entire space to use the 3D vision and the LiDAR to predict where you are and make changes to that. But you can certainly put a smaller space at a location. Certainly for us with our pickup and drop off locations for our current lift bot, we can do we can certainly do sub-centimeter down into very low millimeter positioning of the robots with that device there. And realistically, it's just a visual cue. It's not there's nothing, you don't have to have something there as a full stand. It just needs to be a visual cue.
So it's not a docking
your
station.
Environment more structured, basically.
Yes, basically.
Yeah. Sorry. So it's not like a docking station at that point. It's just a known location, and then the vision call it a vision offset.
Yeah, so you can, I mean, you can do that in many different ways. Some guys now already use, you've probably seen the 2D scanning locations in some factories. Certainly some of the older AGVs and AMRs actually use those as part of their navigation as well. So the more of those you position in a space, especially if we've got a 3D perception of that, it allows you to get smaller and smaller in terms of your location analysis.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. So that was really cool talking about all that technology, but I want to hear a little bit about you as well and some of the strategies that you use, because you just switched industries that, they may be generally automation, but it's a move, going from what you've done at UR and even before that at SMC to what you're doing now at Gideon. So what kind of strategies, you're walking into a role as a sales director, what kind of strategies do you employ personally to be able to see that you're successful in your new role?
Yeah, for sure. I think a solid part of that is the simplicity of the sales team understanding exactly what they need to do. So, clear outlines, clear structures around what the expectation is might sound somewhat micromanageish, but it doesn't. You don't have to manage to those. It's more just an understanding of this is where we're headed. This is why we're headed there. Yeah, so it's the education internally first around the individuals so that they understand why they're coming along that journey. So bringing people along for the journey is certainly a part of it. And certainly in Gideon Brothers, traditionally our sales system has been direct to market. So it's quite a change in terms of the mentality sometimes inside the business as well. Being in that we're now including a distributor platform along with that. So there's a education piece that comes, and internal education is really important around making sure people they don't have to be aligned, but at least in a logical agreement with the direction that you're moving. So that's certainly an aspect. That's internal though. External is where it becomes really interesting. And I actually think after being an SMC, which is hard automation, into UR, which is articulated robot, and now into autonomous mobile robots with Gideon Brothers, one of the things I've learned along the way is that the more interaction you have with customers and with end users, the more simplistically you can take a large environment that looks untenable and turn it into something that people can figure out, and engineers who are much smarter than I can turn that into something that will give a positive and highly rich in terms of return on investment solution. So
you're talking about getting in front of the customers, you mean?
Yeah, and I mean, getting in front of not necessarily the customers, but their application requirement or what they see in their business that's causing them pain. More importantly, identifying that pain and then either making the decision to fix it for them or making the decision to tell them that you're not capable of fixing it for them, which is an important distinction.
Moving on, yeah.
Is that from like a senior leadership level that you're speaking, or an engineering level, or for yourself specifically?
I think, well, given that I'm an engineer by training, so the mechatronics degree that I did a long time ago was something that helps here in terms of the logic and the understanding of what is capable, what we can do with today's technology certainly helps. Being inquisitive is certainly another aspect of that. I have a 3D printer sitting in the corner of my office here. It's got nothing to do with the fact that I want to 3D print things. Yeah. It's more that I wanted to put one together and understand why the technology was something that could be useful. So that inquisitive nature is really important, and that's not just at a management level. I think having an inquisitive nature at a bag carrying sales guys level, getting out there, learning about the different applications, learning by your mistakes and actually learning by your mistakes is really important. And then bringing that back into your logical understanding of how you can do business, what you can deal with, what you can't, and then moving forward with that is quite a nice way to go. Yeah. You still also, I still believe firmly you need a sales methodology around that, something that the company is aligned to as a group organization. And that includes a strong understanding from the marketing side in terms of who to talk to, how to talk to them, that sort of thing as well. So I'm blessed here, honestly, in terms of the marketing group that I have standing beside me. They're very invested in terms of how the sales business runs. And, we've got a powerhouse coming in Sanja, who's come across from a unicorn here in Croatia as the marketing director there into our business. So,
Awesome.
we've got someone as a business to business professional who can understand what that marketing requirement is as well, and also has at least some enough technical understanding that they can converse with somebody as a marketing professional to help them understand what we can and can't do. So there's a lot tied into that for sure.
It helps to be affable too, I think generally in your position. So you have that covered. I'm happy you brought up marketing, because I was going to ask you, is your company a marketing led company or a sales led company?
That's a really good question. I think, given where we sit right now, I think we're still finding our feet in some ways. I'd say, I'm sure Sonia would agree as well, and I know she'll listen to this after the fact, so I've got to be nice here. But I think her and I are very aligned in terms of how we see the marketing and sales activity needing to run. Now, that is an incredibly powerful situation, because we now are very structured in terms of how we move forward. In our own ways, but we also then bring that together consistently to make sure we're moving that forward. Traditionally, we're an engineering-led company, and we're kind of in the process of I won't call it a change. It will never lose that, but it's more of a balancing. We have a very strong engineering background. There's 100 people in the business now, and 60 of those roughly are engineers. 65
you said
are
50
engineers.
of them are PhD level?
Sorry, 10. We have 10 PhDs.
10 PhDs. Still
10
pretty good.
PhDs.
Still pretty amazing.
Yeah, so it's a nice company in that I certainly can sit in the room and be the dumbest man in the room. That's something I long for. It's spectacular to sit there and think of some of the amazing things that some of these guys have done. So we do have a little fun with them every now and again. We've got a Dr. House in our business, so shout out to him, and he's sticking with that name as well.
Sounds good. Yeah. So that makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of times when the company's at your size, they're product led, or as you say, engineering led, and you're kind of going through a transformation in that regard.
Yeah, I think, look, the interesting thing is I just led a internal discussion around the sales, the importance of sales in a business, and spoke with all of the engineers. Basically, everyone was along with that, and it was really interesting. Post that conversation, the number of people that I had come and actually just say, "Hey, I understand what you're doing here. What about this? What about that?" And taking those understandings on board in terms of perhaps what they've seen as well in their history with other companies or with other styles of operation, and bringing those in, and there's, to my mind, there's no such thing as a bad idea, but you can implement something that's bad. The idea might not be bad, but if you take it to fruition, that might be the problem. So there's a lot of excitement inside of our business as well, because we see the potential for the technology, and certainly others are now starting to understand that. And with that in mind, that means a solid workplace for everyone who's working in the R&D department as well, because there's a whole plethora of things that the sales team's going to be asking them for in the next 5 years.
You need to focus them a little bit on deliverables. Yep.
I saw you post on LinkedIn on how you're collaborating with the engineering colleagues that you have and showing them the sales side of things. Pretty funny post, but it goes to show you the collaboration that is going on, right? I think that's a special time for a company to be in. Once a company becomes large enough, they become more segmented, and they have, the higher up certainly have those conversations. But I think the post that I saw from you is you were essentially presenting to all of the engineering team the aspects of selling, right? And how to create a marketing generated opportunity and take it all the way to closure.
Yeah, that's exactly what we were discussing. And we do this regularly inside of our business. Every month, actually, one of the departments will put forward some of their either technology or, in our case, sales. The technology of sales is the methodology that we're using. So the week before, the month before, we had an hour briefing on how our 3D camera works, from all the way from pixel level all the way up, and it
That's
was
why you're
exciting.
so smart.
It
Hour-long
was
briefing.
yeah. Well, look, I have to say, not surprisingly, there were a few things that were outside of my my depth of knowledge.
Yeah.
But the exciting thing is, even with the technology we're using in terms of our vision capture systems, there's another one. There's another one on another planet on the Mars rover. So we're doing, and that to me is sexy and exciting in itself, in terms of the fact that you can say, well, we're working with this exciting, interesting technologies, and then we're extending those and developing them into something that becomes a solution for people that have a pain in their business. That's really, and you're right, Zach, at this point in time, that's exactly what this business is like. You're very, very fleet-footed and making sure that the technology that you're using is perfectly matched. And if it isn't, you'll make the adjustments required to make it fit really well. So it's a nice time to be in a company for sure.
So what do you have for like sales methodologies? You were talking about it a little bit earlier, but you didn't tell us what your secret sauce is. Do you have, one approach, one Bible that you swear by, or is it kind of a blend of all the different things you've learned along the way?
I think, so I've been through now, this is going to show my age, but 6 or 7 different sales methodologies along the way through my career. And what I've found is the one that most aligns with me, and I think most aligns with people who have a logical engineering mindset, is something that you guys might be familiar with as well, in terms of Counselor Salesperson.
Wilson.
So, yeah, Wilson Learning and their package. Now, it certainly is a very strong, and regimented way to sell. Now, most salespeople have their own style as well, and I think one of the things you'll never capture in a methodology is the aspects of somebody who's just good at what they do.
Yeah.
And
without a structure, right?
Without a structure.
I think it's really interesting, because some people are just really talented naturally.
Oh,
Some need it, absolutely, but everyone can utilize it. And that's why I really like the counselor salesperson training from Wilson as well. I know your former boss, James McHugh, loves that, and he brought it to UR. And so I've been through it, and I mean, I think that it's a really powerful way to build structure even behind what you have naturally. So you always have something to kind of go back to and say, okay, well, if we're at this stage, or how do I engage in this type of a conversation? How do I make sure that the customer is getting what they need out of this conversation, and what's in it for me, what's in it for them?
For sure.
Yeah.
It still doesn't, it never covers those mavericks though. I've had guys in my businesses in the past, and there's still people in my business right now who, their methodology is whatever they use of their own, and frankly, for them it works, and for them and in a lot of cases they exceed the expectation of what you can do with somebody, with even Counselor Salesperson. The difference is that those people are not repeatable. You can't train somebody else to be another maverick. It's just not, you can't do it. And even
Unicorn.
They can't train someone to do that, because they don't know what they're doing. They just have their own methodology that works.
Yeah. I do think that the Wilson approach is really good for people who have an analytical mind that want to get into sales too.
I agree.
If you're going to onboard anyone to sales, it's a good way to do it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think it fits, as I started with, it fits really well, I think, with the logical engineering mindset of having at least a structure that you can work to and talk to. So, inside the business at the moment, we haven't done a Counselor Salesperson training, mainly because I haven't got to it yet. It is coming. It'll be down the path. So at this point, the guys are really just having to work with my conversations and understand the little tidbits along the way that are offered to them. But we will get to that point very soon, because it's nice to speak the same language. It's also nice to have engineers in your business, and marketeers in your business, and operations people in your business who also understand the same language, so that when you offer them information without perhaps doing your due discovery, they can challenge you on that. I think sales teams in a lot of cases get away with too much. So it's good to have them, to have people actually to question them along the way.
Hyperbole is a bit of the profession, and
Can
it's
be.
really easy to say this affects everyone when
Well, I think
it's what I heard.
I think that it's interesting that you say that everybody should be a part of that kind of understanding the sales process. I think a well-rounded company also has a lot of well-rounded individuals learning different aspects that they may not have had in previous, whether study or career. And going through a sales training, if you're an engineer, will be worth your while to understand that part of the business so that you can ultimately impact that portion of the business from what you're doing on a day-to-day. But I also think that it's important for salespeople to be well educated within the engineering aspect and within the marketing aspect, and for marketing to be understanding, obviously, of all the different dynamics. And I think the more that everybody has a surface level understanding of what others are doing, the better function occurs within an organization.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think there's never been a training event that I've gone to that I haven't picked up something that I've found of benefit, whether it be accounting, marketing, pick one. There's always something in there that you can use, you can have in your belt for the next time you're having a discussion with somebody that includes that group of people, especially at a customer or end user, when you're having those discussions at different levels with different people, to be able to use and understand their pains as well, and help them with those, no matter where they sit. Just something as simple as issuing a PO for somebody might be quite difficult because of the systems they have.
Yeah.
Being able to understand that and help them with a process that works for you, it certainly provides a lot of benefit. And look, empathy is something that humans have for a reason, and we should use it a lot more regularly than I think we do in some cases. And I think COVID's been a good example of the positives of that for a lot of things, and also some of the negatives. So it's certainly something that I believe we're all definitely capable of.
Yeah. It reminds me of our second conversation we had for this podcast was with Etienne from Vention, and his company's kind of in a similar stage of growth, around the same amount of people as Gideon. They have a very high proportion of engineers as well working with them, and we were asking about his management styles, and it's definitely like there's some congruencies there, and really what he was talking about was he makes sure his engineers, even the deepest back end programmer, developer kind of person, that every single day they're implementing something that provides value for the customers. And that's a really, really hard thing to do, because a lot of programmers, a lot of engineers, they want to make things structurally better so that down the road, it'll be easier for the next person to come along and iterate on their work. And he kind of threw a lot of that out, and he said, no, I mean, don't worry about it. Hack it together, make it lean, like make it work as long as it's providing value now for the customers. And it seems like educating the engineers on how to sell and how to work with customers is a big part of that. I mean, because it's their perceived value.
Yeah, for sure. I think if I draw on somebody in the market that we see do this all the time, and we're all very accepting of, is our friends at Microsoft. They release a product when it's basically 80% complete. Because it adds value at that point already. It's maybe with that exception. So it adds value at that point, and then they iterate on that base platform consistently with updates and the like to fix bugs, change things. And let's be frank, there's a lot of potential in understanding how other people get things wrong. You only learn, you can test things in a lab as much as you like, but until you get them into field and get them really tested, and see how humans interact with them, how other pieces of equipment interact with them, you then start to understand exactly what the limitations are. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. If you can move things quickly and get them into market with people that you trust and they trust you, alpha testing, beta testing with your customers is a really key way to go, and certainly how Gideon Brothers has built some of its most trusted relationships with end users along the way. So that's something that I think is really important. And look, I have to thank the 4 founders who started this business. They're the guys who built what I've walked into. You know, they've built this methodology. They built the people around the business who are here to help. You know, they want to, people are actively trying to figure out how to work. You know, one of the questions I had in that sales meeting, I was actually asked by one of the engineers, how can engineering help sales? That was the question from, and you know, that there's not very, you don't hear that very regularly. In fact, you know, you generally hear, and I think was a comment on my my post on LinkedIn was actually, you know, salespeople are generally the thorn in the side for the engineering department. That was one of the comments, and you know, I absolutely agree. That can be the case sometimes, but you know, one of the things I asked for from the engineering group was some patience. We're not going to get it right every time, and when we don't, we hope that you'll stand beside us and help us fix the problems.
I think one thing too is like sales tends to be, well, they are the closest to the customer. And so they tend to be whether it's right or wrong, they are perceiving their voice back to the company as the voice of the customer. Sometimes it might be off of an anecdote that might be amplified, which might end up becoming more of a thorn
Hyperbole.
rather than being correct. I'm not saying they're always correct, but if they are bringing information back, it is because some customer has said it. Now, quantifying that and understanding how important that is across the whole product
Pervasiveness.
and delivery of it for the future in the roadmap is critical. So I think always taking that feedback and at least accepting it, digesting it, trying to quantify it, rather than being resistant towards it is where product and sales can really work together better and create a much better product in the long run.
And that's the scary job of the product group, you know, is to actually understand what that looks like and how to take that information that's just vapor and turn it into something that's data driven. I don't envy them for that. Certainly, you know, there's certainly salespeople are culprits of groupthink as well. You know, we get together and we start reinforcing our own opinions, and before you know it, we've solved world hunger, but in fact haven't left the couch. You know, groupthink is a real consideration when you're dealing with how to design the next product or what the next product even should be.
I agree.
And we need to be careful of that. Certainly having engineers who are willing to voice their opinion as well at that point is a really strong benefit to a company for somebody to be able to stand up and say, well, I don't believe that's the case in the verbal research I've done with my friends who are all engineers in the same environment, in the same, potentially the same market, you know. So having those,
hard to find that personality in engineering all the time to do that.
Yeah, it's tough to find people that fit into that most of the time. I think certainly heads of department need to have that capability to gather their team and gather the information, be willing to put that forward for sure.
Our product group here loves to ask 3 questions. You know, how painful is it? How pervasive is it? And are people willing to pay for it? Right. That's like their big shield against the hyperbole, you know, vapor that you were talking about that sales kind of spits towards them all the time, which is tough because, you know, salespeople don't always get an understanding of pervasiveness. They do understand anecdotes and they understand who they talk to. They're one-on-one people, and it's kind of up to the product group to go take and find that pervasiveness themselves. But you know, I've been reading a lot the lean startup lately, and I think that's kind of a good bridge where you take an anecdotal problem and you understand that it's affecting someone, but the whole idea is to experiment and to find out how much is that really affecting everyone as a problem. And once you identify the problem, then to see what the value stream would be to solve that problem to them. So it's a tough feedback loop, you know. I think a lot of companies get caught in it.
I still think it's important that you iterate on your technology purely to meet what you think is the change as well that's happening either in market or just even from the engineering group, if there's some very simple iteration that you can make that you believe might have a positive benefit on one operator out there, and it's zero or low cost, it's still
Right.
important to continue that, not to hold people back and stifle them from saying, well, I can make this change. It's an extra line of code, but I know that somebody at some point in the future may need it, and it'll be there. That's also something that I think
It's still providing value.
yeah, it
Absolutely.
is, but it misses the last question, unfortunately, from product group, which is, will people pay for it? Because you don't know that until, in a lot of cases, you don't know what people will pay for it until you have it. It's that's also one of the concerns around that methodology.
There's an Apple ethos, which is like, people don't know what they need.
Yeah.
You were to go out and ask everybody about the way that we're consuming content digitally and using Apple devices, nobody would have painted you the picture that we're all living through right now. Yet everyone loves it, and we're paying crazy amounts of money for it every year. Right.
Well,
Yeah.
So,
they say Henry, if you ask Henry Ford what he would have asked, if he had asked his customers what they would have wanted, they would have said faster horses, right?
exactly.
And
Yeah.
I think that is the designer, inventor, and innovators kind of like crux. I mean, that's the issue that they run into, right? I mean, that's their dilemma.
Well, it's a difference between a problem and finding a solution, for it. And I think a lot of people instinctively try and posit the solution before they even really conceptualize what the actual problem is.
And that's why I think
that's,
iterative improvement versus innovation and invention is so different.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, revolution versus evolution are two totally different things.
Yep.
You never would have done, again, what Apple did if you continued to evolve on what the products were available in the market. We'd still all be using Nokias and Blackberries, but just with bigger screens or some other capabilities.
T9 text.
Yeah, that's right. So the difference is that they took a big leap, and you have to do that sometimes. And in that nature, we took a very big leap. The guys developed, so the four founders of this business developed the 3D technology and the vision system before they even developed. They had a platform to use it on. They didn't know what they wanted to use it for, but they knew that 3D vision was something that was going to be, or more human-like vision. Let's just call it that. Human-style vision was going to be something that was going to be required more and more by machines. The deeper we get into the
brains.
I mean, we're going from automation to autonomy now. That's the step we're making in terms of all of the devices that we're dealing with. Whether it be your simple phone that makes decisions on your behalf as well about what time you need to go to bed. You have all this autonomous data that's driving potentially a significant upswing in terms of how people live, and in terms of how quickly and how efficiently we can produce top level products to help people, with the next step of whatever they're doing in their business as well. So there is some significant change around that autonomy and being able to deal with one-piece flows, because realistically now, even the headset I'm wearing, you can buy it in 6 different colors and you can customize it online before you even do that, So that capability for mass customization is becoming more and more obvious, more and more prevalent, and it goes through everything from automotive through to food and beverage. It's a common theme amongst everything in the market at the moment. And I think having collaborative style products, whether it be 6-axis articulated robots or AMRs, something that can evolve with the humans that are still needed in that part of the business to make those very quick and rational, brain driven rather than data driven changes. There's going to be more and more requirement for that as we move forward, until we get to the point where we can remove humans from the manufacturing space entirely, and we all go to the beach and we have a universal salary system for everyone in the world, which is, a utopian view. It's a Star Trek view, and it's not necessarily something that we'll ever get to, but it's certainly a pina colada on the coast of Mexico sounds a lot better for me than spending every day, trudging around trying to sell things.
Yeah, I have some friends that are definitely not robot people, and I was talking to them the other day about just like the concept of automation and UBI and the cognitive disconnect between the idea, like they truly believe, like they're like, what do you mean? Like not everybody would have to work. And I was like, yeah, that's kind of like, wouldn't that be nice if everyone could go to the beach and hang out
Yeah.
or play video games or, screw off or do whatever you wanted to do? And they were like, no, people are supposed to work. Like, what else would they do? And yeah, it's tough. I think that's a long way away. A few
Oh yeah, for
generations
sure.
at least.
Yeah, that is a generational change for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I doubt that I'll live to see that for sure.
Yeah.
And look, for some of us, certainly, I joke about trudging around selling things, but the work is a key part of what I do. It's a key part of my life, whether it be home life or work life. And I think work life balance isn't a thing anymore. It's actually work life integration. I think all of us, we're working at different times. We're working with different time zones. It's a flat world in terms of how we sell things. Not necessarily a flat Earth, but certainly a flat world. So keeping that in mind with your employees as well, I think is really critical, and helping them along that journey. And certainly, I know Universal Robots helps people understand what the potential is for that without damaging what they see in terms of the employment in the business.
Mm,
And that's what we're doing as well. We're another tool. We're just another tool in the toolbox, similar to what Universal Robots is.
yeah.
We're different tools, but so is a hammer and a saw. We just
Yeah.
have different capability that we're extending humanity by doing, and hopefully saving some people's fingers, toes, lives, whatever that might look like along the way.
Yep. Absolutely.
Definitely.
I got another question for you. We're definitely a little bit over time, but if you can take
That's
another
okay.
one.
Yep.
With understanding your company's origins, do you like to be considered a mobile robot company, or would you prefer to be called an AI company that does mobile robots?
Yeah, so you may have noticed that actually our website is .ai. So
Yeah.
we predominantly started as an AI business, and the OEM style of what we do was, that's our foundation in terms of finding other people to help use our equipment or our technology. I think we're probably a bit of both at the moment. I think it's interesting with the marketing director Sonia starting. She got us all into a room and asked us what we do, and there were 20 people in the room, and there were 20 different answers. Yes, so I think we're right down the middle of that at the moment, where we certainly recognize that we have a very strong technical AI capability, but we also have a product, a commercialized product now that is also a step above. Well, we perceive it as a step above of anyone else out there in the market in terms of what we're capable of. And just to give you an understanding of that, something as simple as navigating around a set of fork blades that are sitting on the ground, we'll do that 100% of the time, and it's not potentially the same for others out there. So we're right in the middle. I don't know that we've decided yet in terms of how we'll name ourselves, our naming convention in the future.
Yeah.
And I don't think that that's a bad thing either. I think we'll continue to hire the PhDs around AI, and we'll continue to find the right people around the engineering and tech, and also the sales space and marketing space to grow whichever way the market pushes us. And that's a part of the excitement of being with a business like this, is that you do have the capability to make those decisions that set the foundation for the next 100 years, whatever that looks like. So it will be, I'll come back to you in, give me 2 to 3 years, and I'll
Yeah.
let you know
Sounds
then.
good.
How does that sound?
Cool. All right, Darrell. That's all I had for you today. What about you, Zach?
I just wanted to know if you had any parting things that you wanted to leave our audience with.
Well, obviously, some thanks to you guys, certainly, for kicking off a
course.
podcast in this space. It's been long required, and I'd love to say I've watched them all, but I haven't. But I've certainly watched a
It's
few,
okay.
and I can see what you're aiming for here, and I think it's a really interesting platform. And the people that you've had along here up until now, certainly some of them are people that I wouldn't have expected I'd be sitting in the same seat as. So it's nice to be put in that. But yeah, so thanks for making this a little more obvious to the market. And also, I think there's a whole lot of people out there who still don't understand the industrial space in terms of what we're doing and how interesting it is to be involved in. I said yesterday in a customer meeting here in Croatia that no matter how many times I walk into an industrial area and see another piece of automation, I'm surprised by what we can do as when we put our minds to it, and I mean humanity in general. So with that in mind, thanks to you guys, and look, certainly happy to discuss anything that I've discussed here in finer detail with anybody who wants to talk to me about it. Yep. That is the job of the salesperson, which we covered on the way through here. So happy to do that as well. But thank you for the time, and thank you for allowing me to offer my opinion.
Our pleasure, Darrell. It was a pleasure talking to you, hearing your quick wit and your sly humor. Again, it's been too long. So I think we should meet up again in a few months, and hopefully we can come see you in Croatia soon. I'd love to come to Zagreb.
Yeah, look, how about we plan to meet on the coast of Croatia in the middle of the summer?
Opatija, I think that, or something like that.
I think that sounds like a much better option.
That sounds good.
And I'm sure we can swing that as some sort of collaboration scenario.
Sounds good. Sounds great.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it.
Welcome to the Robot Thought Leaders Podcast with Zach Tompkinson and Chris Savoya, bringing you in-depth interviews with industry experts driving change in the robot world.